Welcome to Frequency. I'm Chuck Gose.
And I'm Jenni Field. Frequency is your go-to for real talk about comms, culture, and employee experience, beyond the buzzwords and straight to what matters. And to kick us off today, I'm going to ask you a question, Chuck, based on a question that I heard in a team meeting on a client session earlier this week, where they kicked off the team meeting by asking everyone to share a song that they felt represented their mood at this particular time. We have not prepped this.
You have not prepped this. You know what? I've got one.
See, I knew I didn't need to. Go on.
So this will be a good lead into my freak out at the end. I'm going to go with Imitation of Life by REM.
Nice.
That's going to be my song. What about
your song? So mine is The Dog Days Are Over by Florence and the Machine.
Interesting. Okay.
I feel quite uplifted at the moment.
Good.
And I think some of that uplift has come from a recent surprise visit that I did for my best friend Advita this week with my other best friend Trudy. And we surprised Advita, who lives 4 hours away from me on a train, with lunch. So we just popped in to see her for lunch because she was feeling a bit flat. And it just reminded me of the ability that I have to kind of do that, to work on a train for a day rather than work in an office. Not everybody has that. But also just the joy of doing things a bit spontaneously. And I think sometimes we can get stuck in doing the same thing all the time. So it definitely brought me a lot of joy and filled our cups, I think, doing something
very
like that.
nice of you and Trudy to spend that time, because that's a solid 8-hour round trip.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, I left my house at 6:30 in the morning and I got home at 7:30 at night. So
yep.
It was a long day, but worth it. Absolutely worth it. So what are your articles for the week?
Yes. Before we get into our first story, which is a little reminder that sometimes the simplest comms could be the most effective, or are they? The rest of the episode heads in a bit of the opposite direction. We'll look at how AT&T CEO responded to employee feedback on RTO, how one UK council turned a retiring employee into an AI chatbot, and what internal comms can learn from the surprising power of perceived effort in B2B marketing. But let's first talk about simplicity and whether it's always as effective as we think. Jen Becker shared a story about working with frontline employees. This is a post on LinkedIn in a manufacturing setting. And after considering all the latest and greatest tech options, apps, digital screens, other fancy tools out there, the clear winner for the communication was a potty sheet, the paper flyers taped to the back of the bathroom stall door. She makes the case that this was simple, effective, and memorable. And I get it. Sometimes we do overcomplicate frontline comms, and simplicity does matter, but I've got to be honest, I am not sold on this. I am not anti-print. In fact, I'm very pro-print. I'm pro-frontline. But the idea that taping announcements inside a toilet stall is the gold standard of communication, to me, that feels more like giving up and not innovating. And who's going around to maintain these potty sheets as well? What happens when the message changes, or someone tears it down, or it gets ignored on day 2? So to me, Jenny, this feels like a good reminder to meet employees where they are, but, this is a big but, not to stop looking at better ways to engage them, especially when we're talking about reaching people with important and timely information. Jenny, where do you stand on this? Do you think this kind of simplification works in practice? Or is it just another comms trend type thing that looks really good on LinkedIn?
I think the message of simplicity is right. I think the potty sheet, which I'm definitely saying in a very posh British accent, is probably the LinkedIn bait, isn't it? I think that the simplicity piece I do understand. And actually in the research I've done with frontline and deskless workers, notice boards come out as a really positive channel for them because they can choose to engage with it. It feels, I think, just much more personal. It's much more relevant content. It doesn't feel like corporate noise necessarily. And it's all about having the choice to engage with a channel for frontline workers. So I get the premise of it, but I do think it's designed to cause a reaction, which it has done because we're talking about it. But I do think that we should focus on simplicity. I spend a lot of time talking about going back to basics. Like, let's get the foundations right. Let's make sure we're doing this, rather than just focusing on shiny tools. And I think that if we can take that message from it, that just get the foundations right, and some of those things are very simple, straightforward things, then build on top of that with other stuff. So yeah, I'm not going to say potty sheet too much. I just feel like I sound really posh.
So I love the simplicity, hate going back to basics, Jenny. I just do not. Something about that. I don't like. And actually, here's my thing. I don't think this was done by someone to bait a LinkedIn reaction. I think this is a true effort. And again, I'm not saying if you sometimes have to go with what works in your organization. I truly do wonder, like, whose job is it? I don't want that job. I don't know that anybody does. Like, you're going into all of your company's bathrooms and putting these inside stalls on I mean, we talked about how often news changes. And we also know, based on some other research we talked about, I think it was the Unily Screen Club report saying that it takes multiple days to get information down. So it just also seems very impractical. I like the idea of the simpleness of it, but I just hate that we're celebrating this thing, which feels kind of gross in a way, but also I don't understand how you're maintaining this. As somebody that used to go around in a factory and have to replace a weekly newsletter once a week, and that was a chore. And that was just going to like entryways. I wasn't going in the bathrooms and pinning these things up anywhere. So I think it's good to talk about the importance of simplicity, but let's also be innovating and not come to the lowest common denominator all the time.
Do you know what someone's going to do? Is they're going to put very small digital screens on the back of toilet doors.
They're not going to make that investment. They're not going to make that investment.
And then they can just control the message. If that's where you want to get them and that's what works, then.
So if we go back to saying like the values of print, tons of value to print.
Yeah.
I just don't think we put that print in that space for that employee.
I'm also not sure how much I believe that. Like, I mean, are you listing that as an actual channel in your internal comms audit as something that people are going to select as being the best channel?
If you're listening to this and you do that, let us know, because if I haven't shamed you enough already, I want to hear.
Come to us for more shame. Chuck's available for shaming Monday to Friday.
Speaking of shame, great segue here, Jenny. The AT&T recently surveyed employees for feedback on its return to office policy, one of your favorite topics to talk about.
Love this.
The results were clear. Many employees expressed concerns or dissatisfaction over this new policy, but instead of acknowledging the feedback, CEO John Stankey sent a follow-up email suggesting that employees misunderstood the intent of the policy, essentially rejecting the sentiment of the results and reaffirming the company's position. So this raises critical questions about the purpose of employee feedback, and if leadership invites input but fails to validate or act on it, it risks undermining trust, damaging morale, and reinforcing the idea that engagement is simply performative. For comms and HR leaders, this is another reminder that how leaders respond to feedback often matters more than the survey itself. Jenny, what do you think, and what's your take on how this was handled? And when leadership disregards sentiment, what's the long-term cost of that?
Well, I mean, we always talk about the fact that if you're going to ask for feedback, you have to want to do something with it. So I don't really know what they were trying to achieve, I think, with this. is the ultimate question is what was the outcome you were hoping for? Because I think going back and saying, you've misunderstood the intent, and just sort of saying that someone else's experience isn't valid, essentially, is just not leading with empathy. So I don't think it was handled very well. I'd love to know what the intention was, and I always try and caveat that in terms of we don't know what's going on inside, so what was the intention? But to your question about when leadership disregard employee sentiment, what's the long-term cost? It's the trust. You've destroyed it very quickly. And I always talk about the fact that trust isn't always destroyed very quickly. Sometimes it's that sort of drip feed of lots of sort of small behaviors over time that erodes trust. But if you're going to just disregard what people are saying, then what's the point in them ever sharing anything with you ever again? What's the point? And I remember writing a blog post years ago when I still worked internally, and I had a blog called Confessions of an Internal Communicator. And I wrote one called "If You Don't Care About Me, Why Should I Care About You?"
Hmm.
And it was linked to some stuff that was going on in the organization. And this is exactly that. It's like, where's that balance? Because it's an adult relationship. This has to work well. And I just think it's really short-sighted in terms of that long-term view of the relationships with your employees, and essentially probably what you want from them, which is for them to stay, be engaged, come to work, do all those things. I think it's a shame that
Hmm.
it's still happening. But
I think when looking at the reasons why, my hunch goes to there's probably a bit of confirmation bias here, where they
hmm
were going out to get data to confirm their decision to have people come back 5 days a week. Like that's the information they were wanting to get slash hoping to get, and they didn't get that. And so then that was
mm,
that misdirection on it. We've talked over different episodes around soundtracks. And so one of the soundtracks that I always say, anytime I hear the word survey, this phrase that keeps echoing through my head was a friend of mine, Julia Markish, at an event said, only ask what you can act upon.
mm,
So don't ask people if you can't change
mm,
what you're asking them about. This is not that case. This is only ask what you will act upon,
mm.
because he's clearly not. Employees
Yeah, yeah.
said, we don't like this. We don't like the approach. And he's like, well, whatever.
Yeah, make some choices. I mean, when I worked inside an organization, we didn't do an employee survey for about 4 years. And part of the reason for not doing it was because we know the issues for the team are going to be things completely outside of our control because of third parties and the way the organization was set up. So they just stopped doing it. And I'm not saying that was the right thing to do, but to the point of only do it when you know you can act upon it, I think does stand. I cannot fathom what the intention was behind asking this question. Like, it just seems entirely pointless because it's just going to piss employees off even more when they already probably don't want to come back to the office and they've just basically been told, you'll do what we say or else kind of thing. And that's not the world we live in. It shouldn't be the world we live in today. I think it's where we live
There's a lot of
sometimes.
things that are happening in this world that shouldn't be in the world that we live in,
I
Jenny.
know. I felt it
This,
as I said it.
this is not a politics podcast, however. We're now going to move along to a story from your neck of the woods, so to speak, Jenny. A UK city council has taken a novel approach to knowledge retention. They transformed a retiring employee into an AI-powered chatbot. The chatbot was trained on years of her experience and documentation to help answer employee questions and support colleagues post-retirement. While positioned as a clever solution to an institutional knowledge loss, the move opens a range of ethical and cultural questions. Does this kind of automation respect the human element of work or reduce a person's legacy to a database? And what role should AI realistically play in replicating human expertise within an organization? For comms and HR leaders, this underscores the need for clear policies and values around how AI is deployed internally. For you, Jenny, I'm curious, how should organizations balance the benefits of AI with the human side of employee experience, especially when it comes to both legacy and recognition?
So I actually really love this. So I think that I love when you think about the fact that someone that's been there a long time and the amount of knowledge they'd have that traditionally would either be lost or they'd try and write it down in like handover documents or they'd be having meetings to do that. But you can't get all of that out. And I think preserving that using technology, I think is really clever. And they called it like Hey Geraldine or something, didn't they? Which I'm assuming is the worker's name. But I think it's really clever. I think there are huge benefits to AI, and we talk about this a lot. I use it every day. And I think to me, this is such a nice example of using technology with that human legacy and how you can join that together. If I could create, and it's something I've thought about doing, a chatbot on my website where people could ask questions and it would give them information direct from me based on the blogs and the podcasts and all the content that's on my website, I would do that in a heartbeat because I just think it's such a better way to search. And that's essentially what this is. It's just a much richer search experience for people to learn more from someone that's done the role rather than just sort of bland corporate noise. And I think it's a cool legacy. Like, I think yeah, I quite like it. In terms of the recognition piece, are you thinking about how AI links with the recognition of that? Like, are we using this as a recognition tool? Like, if you do a really good job, you can be an AI chatbot.
Well, I was thinking more around like obviously this. I would assume this is a very beloved employee who is retiring, but what about the next employee and then the next employee? Like, is there just one?
Yes. Yeah. So if we're going to
And
have
what's
like,
the
hey Bob, hey Frank, hey
right?
Sandra, like
What's the
we're gonna
legacy
have
of it?
so
I mean,
many.
it sort of goes back to like people are saying you should always be careful putting your name on a building or putting someone's name on a building
Yeah.
because you never know what that person's going to be up to one
Yes.
day.
Yeah. Yeah. Same with like photographs of staff that you've got in different places. Like, what happens if they do something and then you have to take all those
Mm-hmm.
photos down? So I think there's that risk with anything. I think it's a very valid question about, are we now going to have chatbots for every person that leaves? And maybe they've got a rule of, if you've done over 30 years service, then we'll just plug you into this. But yeah, it's interesting in terms of where they take it and what that means. And what are they going to do for other people to capture that knowledge? Because for me, the outcome, if you take the people bit away, it's about making sure that that significant amount of knowledge doesn't just disappear with that person. And I think that's something organizations have grappled with forever, is how do we make sure that we don't lose that?
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's still some questions, but I love the application. I think it's smart.
It's a novel approach to that knowledge retention problem.
Mm,
I think I'm more curious to know like what was it trained on? Like what was the information that this chatbot was trained
mm.
on such that that person felt like the results were coming out. And I've seen this in a couple areas too, where other podcasts I've listened to that are headed up by authors, they're actually now contracting with certain companies to protect their own IP because there's
Mm.
impersonating chatbots out there that are whether you're Mark Cuban or someone like that, and there's a lot of content out there that they're training these chatbots that are based off them, but it's not them. They don't own
Mm.
that. And so one of my biggest regrets in life is I don't know, sometime in the last year, I forget even what brand had it, but Charles Barkley was on it and he was using AI and it was called Chuck GPT. And I was like, oh, why did I not think of
Oh,
that first?
yeah, that would have been good.
So good. But I do think there's some value to what you're talking about, where is it a quicker service? But we've also all used that AI customer service chatbot on
Oh,
websites. And man, it
yeah.
just, that's not the experience you want to have.
Yeah, no, and not on the phone either. Do you know, I get such rage when I'm like ringing the bank or something, which I had recently, and it's going, "Do you want to do this?" And I end up just going, "I want to talk to a human. I want to talk to a human. I want to talk to a human," on repeat until eventually it goes, we'll put you through."
All right, we're going to wrap up this week with maybe my favorite article so far. We've had some good conversation topics, but this was a recent Marketing Week article that explored how hidden biases shape perceptions of brand trust and message effectiveness in B2B marketing, and the findings should prompt internal communicators to take notice. One key bias studied was called the illusion of effort. In an experiment, the same ad was presented to 3 different groups with only one thing changed: how much effort people thought went into making it. And the ad was described as being either created by AI in 10 minutes or less, low effort, crafted by an agency over 1 week, medium effort, or the result of 3 months of work with an agency and an origami artist. You click through the article and see what this ad looks like. Despite being the exact same content shown in those 3 groups, perceived effort dramatically shifted how audiences rated it. Trust in the brand rose from 38% on the low effort side to 59% on the high effort side. That is a 55% jump in those areas. Similar increases were seen in how creative, innovative, and appealing the ad was perceived to be. So reminder, same ad, created in the same way, different narrative told about how it was created, and the trust changed as a result of it. Another bias highlighted was called the red sneakers effect, where people who intentionally break norms, like dressing differently, are often viewed as more competent and respected. In one example, a casually dressed speaker at a cybersecurity conference was rated 43% higher across metrics like trust, innovation, and competence than someone in traditional business attire. Now, I've spent a lot of time talking about these two biases in this B2B marketing world. Why does this matter for internal comms? My opinion, these biases don't apply just to ads or executives. They show up inside organizations every day. If employees think a message was rushed or phoned in, they will trust it less, no matter how accurate it is. Conversely, if a piece of communication clearly shows effort, design, meaningful storytelling, delivery, it gains credibility. And likewise, communicators who push boundaries or challenge norms may actually be more respected, not less, especially in workplaces flooded with safe status quo messaging. So, in a time when AI generated content and templated comms are on the rise, this research is a reminder that how you communicate matters just as much as what you communicate. And employees notice effort, and they notice when you dare to do something different. This is not in support of the potty sheets. So, Jenni, my question for you, what do you make of this? Do you think we underestimate how much effort or perceived effort shapes employees' trust in our work?
Yes. And this is interesting because I feel like it's a conversation I'm having with teams a lot at the moment, certainly leadership teams, about how much time they should be spending to prep for town halls, all staff meetings, things like that. And it's a conversation which always goes down the line of, when do you normally start prepping for this? Because we need to start prepping for it earlier. And we need to start thinking about it now. So I had a conversation with the CEO this week saying, it's 6 weeks till the next one. I want you to start thinking about the outcomes. And they don't normally start thinking about stuff until, I think, a week before. But it shows. And I think even if you are someone who doesn't feel you need to prep very much, or you don't feel you need to do it, it shows, because you would never do that for an external press briefing or something with investors or shareholders. And employees deserve the same, if not more time, given their vested interest in the organization. And I think even if you think it isn't going to show, they're going to know, because there'll be stuff that will show in the handoff to other people, in the structure of how it's come together. If you're not confident in answering the questions, and it's some of it is that confidence in that delivery, I think, in this example I've got of the sort of staff meetings. But I think it's fascinating to have data that shows that if someone thinks something's been done by AI versus, an origami artist and loads of months of work, and that difference in trust, which is what we spend so much time talking about in internal comms, that to me says everything you need to know about how you need to communicate that. I don't know how you communicate that. I think that's the thing that's in my mind is, are we saying we should be, busy, busy, very busy? Like, is it all about like, well, this week we're prepping for this, and this week is it that working out loud stuff that we used to have on social media when it first started? Is that what we need to have more of, so that we're talking about the work that's going on before the stuff? How do we communicate that? Because in this example, it was set up, different groups were told different things, so it kind of worked. So how do we, as to ask the question back, how do we in internal comms make sure that that effort is communicated when it's there in a way that isn't just going, we've spent ages on this. We've been doing this for months. Like, how do you get that right? That's my question for you. And I just, as a side note, love the dress code thing. I remember when I worked in-house as head of internal comms at our conference, we looked at the dress code for the CEO and the COO for the annual conference and deliberately moved them into more relaxed stuff as part of that. And I think for internal comms people, I would say, don't disregard all of the things that communicate. Don't just focus on the words and the presentations. There's so much more to what's part of the communication. And this also proves just how important that is.
Yeah, I don't have an answer for the how do you communicate how much time you spent. I do think effort truly does show. And I actually see the two extremes a lot of times with communicators. They're either underplaying the effort, like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, don't worry about it, I didn't spend much time on that, when they actually did. Or to your point, is that busy, busy, busy. And then people are like, really, you spent that much time on
Mm-hmm.
this? Like, it doesn't feel like there's that much there. And so I do think that's a dangerous thing. I think the point here is that there is a bit of working out loud, I think, in consistency and prep and planning and communicating those things, because it basically says if people feel like you put effort into it,
Mm,
then they will trust it that much more. And then to the red sneaker thing, I
mm-hmm,
think on a previous episode we talked about the majority of employees don't feel like they can be themselves
mm-hmm,
at work. And I think this shows like, no, be yourself. Like if you want to be trusted and respected, other, maybe your leaders maybe don't see it that way, but others will. They will see that you are being yourself. You're maybe still respectful of the norms, but you're still challenging them and pushing boundaries.
mm-hmm,
And that's, I think, what people do like to be a part of.
mm,
So anyway, that was sort of me linking it back to a previous conversation.
mm,
I think it's a chance for us to be yourself a bit
mm.
more. And that shows that people do respond positively to that. Because I will say there's times where I second guess it when I see it's like, oh, they intentionally put that executive in jeans and a t-shirt because they want him to be like the common man, when that's not really who that leader
Who
is.
knows?
We
Yeah.
talked about the authenticity side. This speaks to that. Like, who are they? If they're a suit person, keep them in a suit. If they are, I was just on a call today and someone showed up in a backwards hat and I'm like, I've never seen that side of you before and I kind of like it. So it's good to encourage people to be themselves, but when they're not, that also I think comes across no different than those ads come
Mm.
across. That it's going to be trusting if the effort's not there or the authenticity isn't there.
I think it also talks to trust in a much bigger sense. And I think there's some work to do around trust, which we know in organizations with leaders. And I think sometimes we get stuck focusing on, you know, the words, the message, and that's kind of it to build the trust. And it might be a one-off thing where I actually think what we need to be looking at is a trust strategy. And I was having this conversation this morning around what's the strategy, like what's the strategy or what's the plan? Like if at the moment we're saying we need to do this like next month, okay, but that can't be just a one-off thing. Like there has to be a suite of things that are going to help us do this. And I don't know how much we're looking at it in a really truly integrated way at all of those different touch points, opportunities, like all those different ways. And to your point, like that really creative thinking, which we've talked about a few times in this, of, you know, being able to think creatively about how you can do it and starting with a blank sheet of paper and saying, right, what could we do that's going to bring all these different elements together with the knowledge of this article that's talking about that behavior impact through data. And I think there's just so much more around trust that I don't think we're looking at. I think we're very narrow in the
Mm-hmm.
communications industry on that. And I think this kind of proves that there's a lot more to it than I
Mm-hmm.
think we're probably spending time on.
Yep. That wraps up this week's slate of articles. Jenny, thanks for that conversation. We move into our freakouts. What is your freakout this week?
So I shared a post on LinkedIn today, as we're recording, on some recent data from Gallup on employee engagement. And I was sharing some of their Q2 data on the state of engagement in the US. And somebody commented on it, Jenny Jones commented on it and said, you know, this is dismal but not surprising, which made me go back and say, I'm not really sure the numbers have ever been good. And now I want to go back and have a look and see what they say. Now, it's been a quick look because I've had a busy day, so I haven't had a chance to properly verify. But I was having a look at the numbers with Gallup and how far back that data goes, because we talk about how bad the numbers are, but there's no anchor point for these numbers. And I wanted to go back and see, have they ever been good or bad? So if you look at what I found was that it sort of started in 2000 and it was around 26% then engagement. It peaked in 2020 at 36% and it's been steadily declining since then. It's currently around 31. This is all in the US. I mean, it tracks with what I think we see in the rest
Mm-hmm.
of the world. But what was what's made me freak out about this is it's never been above 36%. So as a measure, and you and I have talked a few times about employee engagement and all of the challenges with that. But what are we doing if it's not like it's ever been 80% or no, it's stayed at this 36 to 30, like that's it. That's all it's been for 25 years. Then why are we, what, it's never, I've run out of words. It's never going to suddenly become 50%. Like, and it just feels so sad that it's in this sort of 36, 31, 26. And we're really sad about that, but it's never been anything else. And I feel like it just is what it is. And that's the most it's ever going to be. And that's okay. That's what it's kind of meant to be. Because if in 25 years it's never been any different, we might as well just accept the fact that that is where the level of employee engagement will always sit if you're looking at that aggregate measure across there. It's always going to sit around that. So just accept it. It's kind of what I've got to.
It.
I know, but there's so much talk about the numbers. We talk about the numbers, but they're not going to change because to the point we've talked about before, I think my freak out last week was why do we hate work? Or why do we think work is bad or jobs are bad? But if this is where it sits as a nation in the US or even across the world, there is this general premise that it sits at about this 36%, that sort of level, then that's okay. Let's just leave it there.
It is okay. And I think it goes back to there's this expectation that employees are engaged. And I think we should actually expect the opposite.
Yes.
I think we should expect, and we should actually build ways to engage employees. And I think much like you said, we've had this narrow view of trust. We've had the same narrow view of what engagement is. And so I think we're falling into that same trap. I will admit, when I saw that you had posted that, I didn't click through to read more because I'm like, I don't like.
No.
It's kind of that's where we are. But I wonder if you could almost compare it to, like, I don't know, do they report unemployment rates in the UK? Like, is that a economic statistic that?
Yeah, I feel like I've got. There's more. I've got more work to do here. I've given myself a project, haven't I?
So because here, like, people, there's always this unemployment rate. It goes up, it goes down. Everybody thinks your unemployment rate should be 0. That actually doesn't signify a healthy economy. You actually do want to have some element of employment rate. You want this element of people moving jobs, leaving jobs, all that. It's not stagnant. So is that an element with engagement rates where, yeah, they're always going to be around this amount, and there might be little ticks up and little ticks down, just like employment rates are the same. If it really bottoms out or really shoots up, then there was some external trigger, but otherwise it's kind of just there the whole time.
Yeah. I'm going to have to look at it a bit more because I've had a bee in my bonnet about engagement for a long time, which was, I think, partly triggered by you. So thanks for that a few years ago. And I feel like it's just such a, I was going to say a stupid metric. I feel like it's not the right metric for organizational health.
I think that's fair. And I think it goes back to the, what gets measured gets managed. And so organizations will report 80%, 70% because that's what they need to manage to hit.
Yeah. But if they're reporting 40%, they're still not doing anything about it, which we talked about, for the last few weeks. So why are you measuring it? Yeah. What are you doing?
Same.
Fine. Right. I'm stopped now. Good. Thank you for that.
Okay. Good. Well, let's end on a very positive note here, Jenny, about my freak out, which is I sent you a message earlier this week talking about how I was just very uninspired by things lately. And I'm someone who thrives on inspiration. In fact, actually gets a high off of inspiration. Just a couple of days felt very uninspired until, and we talked about this on a previous episode about how short form content can kind of trigger responses. There was this, I'm going to say silly, but actually ended up not being silly, Instagram slider that was this illustrated image that I sent to you called about the crab mentality of how allegedly, I have not tested this, but if crabs are in a bowl and a crab tries to climb out, the other crabs pull it down. And the premise of this is that crabs aren't meant to be in bowls. And I've wondered if like this weird LinkedIn echo chamber that we've all been in is sort of this bowl. And I feel like some of us are trying to climb out. We're trying to level up the conversation, in fact, change the conversation, but these other crabs keep pulling us down back into the bowl. And so I don't know if it's spending less time on LinkedIn. I don't know if it's about every couple of years I do a little bit of a trimming and maintenance on my connections. I don't know if there's a little bit of that I need to do, but it was funny that this crab mentality illustrated image kind of brought me out of my uninspired funk.
And I think that sometimes there is a lot of negativity on places like LinkedIn. Like I saw a post the other day and it was like, "You are not a failure." And I was like, cheers, I know, I'm going to move along. But I was like, I don't need to see that in the morning. Like, how is this helpful? Like, come on. And I think sometimes there is that I feel like I'm a crab in a bowl sometimes. So I definitely think it's time for a little pruning, as they would say,
Yep.
to make sure your feed is good.
Okay. Well, thank you all for joining us this week. All the articles that have inspired this conversation are in the show notes. And do not forget to rate and review after you've listened. Subscribe so you don't miss another episode, and pass this along to someone you think would enjoy listening or watching. You can also find us on YouTube. Thank you to Poet Ali for contributing music to the show. We'll be back next week with more news, insights, and opinions about everything comms and leadership in workplaces today. Keep tuning in and turning up.